Thank you everyone for coming to my session on product management in an all-remote environment. I'm Melissa Ushakov. And I'll start by thanking our sponsors and also thank you to all our volunteers for working to put together this product camp. I know it's been a little bit different than other years and it's probably had some challenges, but thank you for still having this platform for everyone to collaborate and learn. So like I said, my name's Melissa Ushakov. I'm a senior product manager at GitLab. And I've been working with remote teams for a long time, for 10 years. But with this role at GitLab, it's definitely been a little bit different. I work with my entire team is around 6 time zones and 7 countries. So we are highly distributed. GitLab actually doesn't have a headquarters. Everyone works from home and we're spread all over the world. So fun fact about my team, or maybe not fun, depending on how you feel about it, but we actually don't have an hour in the day where all of us are awake and at work. So that makes us have to be a little bit creative on how we work together to still move things forward. So I've learned a lot. I've been in this role for 6 months, and I know since a lot of you may be working remotely for the first time due to COVID-19 and just how that changed the workplace, I thought it would be great to share with you all what I've learned. And then I hope that from this session, you can take a few elements of how we work and maybe introduce some of these concepts to your team. So I'm going to be talking about 2 main things. The first one's called asynchronous communication. Then I'm going to talk about how we keep social connections alive in our team. And I'm going to be pausing for questions through the whole session, but I'll have a dedicated time for sessions at the end too. So asynchronous communication. I'm going to start with a quick poll, and it's how many hours a day do you spend in meetings? A is 0 to 2, B is 3 to 5, and C is 5+, also known as help me. So you can answer in chat. All right, it looks like a lot of people are in category B. I personally used to be category C, but now I'm more in A. And as a PM, a lot of people will want your time, right? But I'll show you how you can still collaborate with people without having to be in Zoom meetings all day. And that's through a concept called asynchronous communication. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to read through this. So asynchronous communication, in short, how I interpret this is communicating with someone and doing so as if they're asleep on the other end, which isn't that hard for me because for me, a lot of times it's true. Because like I mentioned, my team, a lot of them are on the other side of the world, right? And when I first saw this, it's, you know, it's a little bit different from the way I've worked before. And I had a hard time understanding, you know, how does this apply in practice, right? Communicating with someone like you won't get an answer right away. How does that translate to my work as a PM? So I'm going to take an example that I hope is very familiar with all of you, which is taking issues, stories, requirements from inception all the way to the point where they're ready to be worked on by a dev team. And you can translate this example to basically anything where you're collaborating across teams. So in the past, what this looked like for me was 8 hours of meetings, right? I would create issues, stories, right, for my team. and bring them to a meeting, and we would all sit together and talk about them for hours, right? A lot of times it would be all-day meetings, maybe 2 days of all-day meetings, and basically we all sat together and talked about all this work that we were going to be working on in the next time frame. But now with my team, we do it asynchronously. So how that works is that we use our issues, or whatever tool you use for issue tracking, right? That is a source of truth where all discussions happen about this particular change that you want to make. So it starts with me as a PM, typically, right? But really anyone can create an issue. And I'll come up with the idea and document it. And then I basically will, whenever I feel like I'm ready for someone else to take a look at it, I'll tag that person in the issue tracker. And we basically have a discussion on it there. So instead of jumping in a meeting, instead of talking to them on Slack, right, it's all taking part in that issue. And then typically the first stop is UX, right? So they'll create some designs and they'll upload them again to the issue, right? And as I have questions, as I have comments, I'll reply to it there. And then once we're ready, we start involving other parties, right? So sometimes it's a technical writer. And the great thing about when you're working this way is that as you're bringing more people in, into the fold, they see all of the discussion that's taken place already, right? Because you've done it all there. You don't have to have a meeting to bring them up to speed. There's no gaps in their understanding because everything that's happened is visible in the issue. So once we're ready for engineering to take a look at it, and then I see the questions there. Yeah, sometimes we do external validation, right? So with UX, we can do testing. We can do surveys. But again, if we do, for example, real live usability testing, we'll record it and upload and link to the recording in the issue. Again, so the issue is still the source of truth for everything about this specific change. Once we're ready for engineering to take a look at this issue, we have a process that they do refinement again in here. And I'll tag a specific engineer and say, hey, can you take a look at this issue? What do you think? Is it ready for you to estimate it? And if it's not, they'll ask questions there and I'll reply to them there. And then once they feel like they're ready, they can assign a point and then they will tag another engineer to take a look. So we do at least 2 people refining an issue just to make sure there's been, you know, more than one person looking at it. So we basically do a little bit of refinement every day, right? Instead of having to sit in a long meeting where, you know, most of the time, at least in my experience, there's 1 or 2 people contributing to each story at a time, right? And the rest of the people are sitting and sort of waiting. So you get away from that, right? And you only have the people involved that need to be involved, yet the issues are visible to anybody that wants to take a look. So as far as time goes, because I see here, how long does it take? So I would say total time spent is probably the same, but it is, like I mentioned, you do a little bit every day. So if you think about it, right, for my team, we have month-long iteration cycles. So typically we would have, I don't know, 2 days of refinement at the end, right before we go into planning. Instead of doing that, we do, you know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day, and it takes us, depending on the size of the story, like 4 or 5 days if it's something straightforward, just because you are going back and forth. So with the process like what I described, and this is one example, right, of taking something that typically would be synchronous and making it asynchronous, you have a single source of truth, right? So like I said, we talk about every conversation we have about this particular change is within that issue in our issue tracker. It's more visible to everyone, right? Because the whole team has access against has access to see these issues, so everyone can go look at them. One thing that I think is really important is that you have more time to think about an issue. A lot of times what I found is that when you're in this synchronous refinement meetings, you have to give an answer on the spot. So it's nice to be able to have time to take it back, think about it a bit. Sometimes their engineers go look at the code, right, to make sure what they're estimating is accurate. So that's something that's nice. And no long meetings. So that's something that's really nice too. I don't think anybody enjoys sitting in meetings for 8 hours. So I'll pause here. I see a couple of questions. Hector, do you want to voice them over?
Yes, so I see that GitLab is actually part of how you actually collect code from developers, and then you allow developers to share that code with each other. So your users are developers, is that correct?
It's really, we encompass the entire DevOps lifecycle. So it's everywhere from developers to engineering managers, portfolio managers, deployers, the whole gamut.
So who are the buyers for your solution? I mean, is it the publishers, the software publishers and integrators? Who actually pays to get access to everything that is checked in via GitLab?
If you don't mind, we can have a side discussion about this, just to focus on the async communication and team dynamics. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. I just wanted, because my thought was, do you think that this solution would work when the users are not necessarily tech savvy, or, does async communications work if you're creating like a fintech solution? If, let's say, you're a bank and now you're creating fintech applications.
Yes, absolutely. I think and this concept can be used to anytime that you're collaborating across a group of people. Most of the time, there's a way to at least make aspects of it asynchronous. It's not just dev team interactions, and I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Thank you.
So how long does it take? I see that question. Like I said, it depends on the issue, right? There's times when a specific issue will take us, 1 day if it's something really simple. Sometimes it takes a while, right? Like, especially if I go back to, UX validation, sorry. This part between PM and UX, that can take a bit, just like any issue, right? If it's something that is heavily user-centric, sometimes we have to go do user testing, go talk to customers, right? So it really depends, but it can be as quick as like a day or two, and it can be a while. It just depends on the size of the issue. And then Mark, I see your question. When someone poses a question, it's important to be direct. Yes, absolutely. One thing that this new method of working has helped me do is just be a lot more conscious about my writing and making sure I'm direct and I'm anticipating follow-up questions. Another thing that really helps is that when you move to this method of communicating, we have something that is called a bias for action, right? Which is, if you have a question and you think you know what the answer is going to be, just go forward, right? Don't wait for an answer, because you're introducing delay in the process. So it also requires an amount of trust in your team. So potential challenges, right? So some things that I found as I was moving to this new way of thinking, especially around issue refinement, what was tough about the move? One was process confusion, right? So I think it's important, like I said, we have a way that I tag a specific engineer and I ask specific questions, right, that provide points. That didn't happen overnight. We sort of evolved into this process. And it's very important that everyone knows what's expected of them at what specific points, right? Because you are going back and forth, you want to reduce the amount of delay as much as possible. Another thing that can be challenges is if you're trying to solve something too big, right, in this way, it's really important that you break down your problems as small as possible, so that when you are thinking about something, it's small. It's a lot easier to get through refinement, just like anything, right, when your issues are small enough. And like you can guess, you don't walk into a meeting and walk out with refined issues like you would otherwise, right? So it is important to have enough lead time, right? Like if you know your next iteration starts in 2 days, right? You really should have been doing refinement, you know, for the last couple of weeks to ensure you have enough issues. So it does require a certain amount of discipline, right, from everyone involved to make sure that you are answering questions, that you are checking notifications, that you are moving things forward with enough time. And we have a couple of questions, so I'll pause here. Troy, do you want to voice over your question?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, this is Troy. So I think story refinement lends itself well to asynchronous communication because it's kind of a chat back and forth, and it's the kind of problem solving that takes a little bit deeper thinking. But retrospectives seem to be a little bit more squishy in that area, and it seems like intuitively they would benefit more from a real-time back and forth. Do you guys have a different way of doing retrospectives that empowers asynchronous communication, or do you just not do them, or do you find a time?
Yeah, so we actually do retrospectives, and we also do them asynchronously. So we create, at the end of every iteration cycle, we'll create a issue that's called retrospective for sprint 25, right? And we post the typical questions, right? So we have one thread that's what went well, and one thread that what can be improved. And we will tag the entire team, right? So we say, hey, developers, please enter your feedback here. And we actually have a discussion back and forth within the issue and the issue tracker. And it actually works quite well. One thing that I will say is really nice about having methods of communication that aren't real life is also a lot of times you get more participation because people have more time to think right before they write something down, and you also don't have to, you know, fight for the mic to speak. So we actually do get into really good discussions in those issues.
That's cool. Thanks very much.
And there was another question from BMO Studio. Do you want to voice that over?
Yeah, sure. So this is Alex. It's just BMO is the alias I use. Sorry about that. So the question goes like this: in async land, decision making can be somewhat muddled. How can an async team converge on a decision and not continuously relitigate it in Slack?
That is a really excellent question, and it's absolutely true, right? And the way that we solve for that is that we always have someone who's designated as the DRI, so the decision maker, right? So for example, if it's around scope, right, the decision maker is product. So you're empowered to basically state the direction that you're going. And if it's about the technical design, the decision maker is developers, right? And that's the way that we solve it, really, is just by making sure we all know who the decision maker is and having that person be really empowered to make the decision. And it's, it's just the dynamics of how we work, no feelings hurt, right? Of course, you have to be cordial about it, just like anything, but that's how we solve that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, so I'll move on. And like I said, I wanted to walk through one example to get your minds going, but there's a lot of other things that you can make asynchronous, right? And there's 3 main mechanisms that I personally use to do asynchronous communication. The first one is issues, right? So in issue tracking, Like I said, I already mentioned sprint retrospectives we do through issues, right? So we'll create an issue that says, hey, this sprint ended. What went well, what didn't go well. We actually do sprint planning through an issue too. So I'll create an issue that says, hey, we're getting started. Here are and it's just like a discussion in real life, right? So I'll link to, we have a report that says what our capacity is. We have a report that has, what issues have been through refinement. And then I'll tag different team members as I gather feedback about what we should work on. And the nice thing too is that that issue is basically anyone in the company can see it, right? So a lot of times like salespeople or relationship management people can see those issues and they'll jump in and they can see exactly what our team is planning without having to ping and ask me, right? So that's another good side effect. We also create pages that document different things, right? So as you can imagine, and like I said in my previous slide, it's really important that we're all on the same page about what our process is to make sure we avoid delays as much as possible. So we do have pages that exist for our team that document our process and how we do things. So that way, if anyone has a question, they can always go refer to it. And those pages are available, basically anyone can edit them on the team. So everyone's empowered to propose a change to our processes. And my roadmap's also available on a page that anyone can see. So that way people don't need to, ping me to ask me about our roadmap and what we're working on. The next one is one that is really fun, and it's videos. That one was definitely new for me here at GitLab in my role. And it's actually a really powerful one. So you can, record videos, record conversations, and make them available to the team. If you ever have an announcement that you need to make to the team, instead of having a meeting, you can just record on Zoom and send everyone the link. I also often walk through demos, either of new features or specific workflows that I think are useful, and I'll record myself going through them. I know that can sound really intimidating, and it definitely is as you first get started. So it's really helpful if you can have somebody in the room with you to kind of make it more of an interactive session, especially as you're, getting used to recording yourself. Sorry about that. And then we also record calls all the time, right? So sometimes we will have to have a synchronous call and somebody on the team can't be there. So we'll record it and make snippets available to everybody or make the whole call available. So those are ways that we do asynchronous communication in my team. So again, like I said, there are times when you do need to be synchronous, meaning having, face-to-face meetings, or I actually consider Slack a synchronous communication method, right? Because when you do send a Slack message, you are expecting an immediate response. So times when it's important to be synchronous is if there's no alignment, right? So we've all been on those emails where you're going back and forth, right? And you don't seem to be going anywhere. At that point, it is more time effective to just schedule a quick 30 minutes, reach a decision. And then once you do, you can continue working asynchronously. And this you'll find that you need to do this a lot more often as you're getting started. But as you get more practice as a team, you'll have to do this less and less. And last is to build relationships, and I'll go in a lot more into that when I talk about kind of how to do social connections in a team. All right, there's a question in chat. So Tunji, do you want to voice that over?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just checking, you talked about working within multiple time zones, multiple geographies. So how is a feature release and product release achieved within the team? And how does the team work around maybe challenges that they might have encountered in the process?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is very important is that you scope your changes as small as possible, right? Um, that is the key, I think, to working effectively across geographies. When you try to take on something that is really big and hairy and unknown, right? Uh, your probability for delays is higher. But if you scope issues small enough and just basically iterate on them, it's a lot easier to be successful. And that's sounds easy, but it can be quite difficult, right? But I think that's where a PM really has a good chance to improve how a team works asynchronously and across geographies.
Just a hint to the speaker, we have 5 minutes into the session.
Oh, so in chat, I would love if you guys could take 2 minutes just to think about, is there something that your team does synchronously that you could do async in the future? Yes, daily stand-up's a great one. We actually do that one on Slack. We have a bot that pings each of our team members and they provide an update. And then we have a channel where we have everyone's daily stand-up update. And I just go read that every morning. All right, I'm gonna move forward just in essence of time because I do want to get, and this one is very quick, how we continue to be social. So I'm a strong believer that having, strong social connections within your team really helps you, one, enjoy your work more and also work better as a team. So there's a couple of things that we do just to make sure that we, still get to know each other. One is that we have a social channel on Slack. So it's separate from our work channel and it's basically water cooler talk. We have a bot that asks fun questions. So like, what's your favorite food? What's a fun thing you did outside of work? Twice a week. And, it's completely optional. Whoever wants to join in can. We actually have really fun discussions there. So I actually really enjoy our social channel. I feel like I get to know everyone on the team a little bit better. We have a concept called coffee chats, which is you can schedule 30 minutes with anyone and you don't talk about work. It's just you get to know them better. And I've done that with everyone on my team and it's really fun. I try to do them every couple of months. And then we have something called Team Day, which is across our whole org, right? Not just my direct team. We get together and play games online. We play Drawful. I don't know if you've ever played it, but it's like online Pictionary. It's really fun, and you get to know people that you wouldn't have in my case, right? People that aren't directly on my team. I really love that idea of Google Maps and giving people a tour. That's a really fun one. Maybe that's something we can do. We have talked about, we've also done something where we show something from our homes, right? So something that is a valued possession and you just talk about it a little bit. It's really fun to bring people into your work, even though they're on the other side of the world.